He was a high-profile millionaire making waves in Atlanta.
He loved to be about town. He fancied himself as kind of a great Gatsby.
She was an exotic island beauty in search of the American dream.
She was ambitious, she was intelligent, and she was trying to better herself.
When their stars collide, their steamy romance plays out like an X-rated movie.
Sexually, they were like fireworks. He told people that she satisfied him in a way that no one else satisfied him.
But just when their carnal lust reaches its peak, an intimate secret is exposed.
For him to have such a secret life, that was a shock.
And the consequences are deadly.
When someone is beaten, that really blood splatters everywhere.
Investigators soon uncover a bevy of beautiful suspects, each with their own lurid connection to the victim.
He really led a secret life. Sometimes that would include threesomes, foursomes.
There were lots of people who had motive. There were lots of people who had opportunity.
This was one of the most gruesome scenes that I had seen. The question is, who was angry enough to have done this?
August 8, 1996. It's a serene morning in the upscale Atlanta suburb of Roswell, Georgia. But that tranquility is shattered when police receive a desperate 911 call. On the line is Jackie Herndon.
Emergency, somebody done killed my baby. Okay, tell me what's going on. I don't know, I came in the house, he's 40 years old, I found him in the bed. Hurry, please.
Police rush to the address and race upstairs to the master bedroom.
Police department.
What they find is unsettling to even the most seasoned officers.
Room is unbelievably bloody. The sheets are covered in blood. The pillowcases are covered with blood. It is a very terrible scene.
In the bed is the naked, lifeless body of a middle-aged African-American male.
Major crimes and forensics.
His head was battered in a very forceful way, no less than 14 times.
The victim is identified as Jackie's son, 41-year-old Lance Herndon, a successful and highly regarded businessman in the Atlanta community.
Lance was a high roller. He had a beautiful home in Roswell. He had nice vehicles. He dressed well. He took care of himself.
He's been down about 12 hours.
As medics pronounce Lance dead, police begin to process the scene. But what nobody inside this upscale Atlanta home can fathom are the twisted skeletons lurking inside the closet of one of the city's rising stars.
I've described Lance as somewhat of an iceberg. I mean, what you saw was what was sticking out of the surface, but below there was a lot of other stuff going on.
Born in 1955, Lance Herndon grew up in the historic New York neighborhood of Harlem. With both of his parents working full-time, Lance was the classic latchkey kid.
His mother left notes whenever she needed to tell him something. So Lance mostly was raised by babysitters.
The absence of his parents, particularly his mother, seemed to affect Lance's ability to foster lasting relationships with the opposite sex.
It goes back to that lack of relationship with his mother. He was still trying to fill that void that was missing. He really did not know how to relate to women.
But one thing Lance did learn from his parents was the value of hard work. Lance poured his heart and soul into his professional life.
Lance Herndon was a very bright man, a very driven man, a very disciplined man.
Lance moved to Atlanta to pursue a career in computer science. And then he started his own company, Access Inc., which staffed computer staff personnel to different companies.
And in his 30s, his hard work and unparalleled salesmanship netted him some highly coveted customers.
Lance had some really impressive clients. IBM, Nations Bank, Citibank, Coca-Cola.
He was considered one of the top 100 black entrepreneurs in the country.
With his business booming, Lance built his dream home, a colonial-style estate in the North Cliff neighborhood of Roswell that also acted as the headquarters for his company.
The top floors were reserved for their private home, and Access Inc. was in the basement.
It wasn't just Lance's business that was booming. For a man who'd previously had trouble hitting it off with the opposite sex, Lance's multi-million-dollar company and sprawling estate certainly made it easier for him to connect with the ladies.
He had a lot of money. And for someone with power and stature, Atlanta was ripe for the picking for women.
I think he couldn't help it. He seemed to care for the girls, but he wasn't satisfied. He was addicted. He needed more and more and more.
By the time he was 40, Lance had been married and divorced 3 times. But even though he seemed addicted to the Playboy lifestyle, Lance longed to meet that special someone.
Lance needed to be loved. He was still trying to fill that void that was missing.
Lance celebrated his 41st birthday with a lavish party. It was there that he was introduced to an Atlanta bombshell he'd never seen before.
Lance, meet my friend Dion.
Dion.
29-year-old Dion Baugh.
Happy birthday. Thank you.
The two connected instantly.
Dion was from Jamaica. She was petite. She was attractive. She was enrolled in college at Georgia State. And I think it's fair to say that Dion wanted to climb to heights that she had not achieved in her life.
Lance was intrigued by Dion. He liked small, petite, fair-skinned women. She had this Jamaican accent that made her exotic, and the relationship took off suddenly.
The Jamaican beauty and the Peachtree City power player soon became inseparable, though most of the couple's time together was spent in the bedroom.
He met his match with Dion. He told people that she satisfied him in a way that no one else satisfied him.
A little good.
In exchange for nurturing him both sexually and emotionally, Lance showered Dion with lavish trips and luxurious gifts.
Oh my God, baby.
And even helped pay for her schooling. Anything Dion desired was hers for the asking.
He started to buy her jewelry and expensive gifts and bought her a brand new Mercedes.
She really thought, I've made it. I have struck it rich. I love him. He loves me. I'm going to marry him.
But just as Dion and Lance seemed ready to tie the knot, their relationship was cut short in brutal fashion. It starts when Lance's mother reports finding his body in his palatial master bedroom early on the morning of August 8, 1996.
She has found her son dead, naked, in bed, bludgeoned to death.
But as police begin to dissect the scene, they'll soon discover that Lance Herndon's life of luxury did more than allow him to land the woman of his dreams. It also allowed him to indulge other dark fantasies that may have led to murder.
He was such a well-respected businessman. Nobody really would have guessed that he had this kind of seedy sex life behind the scenes.
Lance Herndon was considered one of Atlanta's top businessmen.
He really did embody the entrepreneurial spirit of African Americans during the 90s.
But while Lance succeeded in business, his personal life was less fortunate. That is, until he met a 29-year-old Jamaican-born beauty named Dion Baugh.
She was very fair-skinned. She was from the islands. It was an eye candy, another eye candy for him. It was a chase for him.
But Lance and Dion's red-hot romance was snuffed out when Lance's mother discovered her son's dead body in the master suite of his sprawling suburban mansion.
There is blood all over the bedroom, and Lance Herndon has been bludgeoned to death.
His skull had been smashed multiple times. He'd been beaten brutally.
Judging from the state of rigor mortis, it appears Lance had been dead 5 to 7 hours. But as they survey the scene inside the opulent master bedroom, investigators can't help but wonder if someone targeted the dashing businessman for his money.
Lance Herndon had become a very powerful man. He was very successful. He was making money, and people recognized him.
But an initial search of Lance's residence suggests otherwise.
Nothing of value is missing. His wallet is on the table. Money's still in it. His IDs are still there. Everything of value is still in place.
But in Lance's office, investigators determined there is one item of value missing.
That might be a laptop. Yeah. Check that bag.
They noticed his laptop wasn't there.
Lance was a shrewd businessman in the dog-eat-dog world of technology. Is it possible his murder was the work of an adversary looking to take out their primary competition?
He also had other things going on from a business standpoint that could have created other suspects in this case, other people that had an axe to grind with him, other people that broadened the field of suspects.
According to Lance's mother, who made the initial 911 call, the idea that her son was loathed by his competitors doesn't hold water.
They're telling the police everything that they know about Lance. They don't think he has any enemies. He got along with everybody, and he was very well respected.
And as investigators survey Lance's battered corpse, they begin to see another, more personal motive behind the crime.
The police theory was that it was a crime of passion, meaning someone was very upset or mad because they didn't strike him once or twice, but actually many times.
Detectives also noticed a few other strange clues scattered around Lance's bedroom.
There was a couple of porn tapes. There were condoms on the dresser or on a counter.
He's obviously in bed when he's killed. Whether he's in bed when the person arrived or not, it's not clear.
The pattern of the blood was a V pattern that even extended to the ceiling. And so this theory was that whoever committed this crime was straddling Lance and was hailing down these terribly violent blows in a very forceful way.
The murder weapon is nowhere to be found, but Lance's housekeeper offers police a possible clue.
The maid tells police that a large crescent wrench is missing from the house. It had been there consistently every day, and all of a sudden it was missing. So they think that could possibly be the weapon, but they can't find it.
The missing crescent wrench isn't the only roadblock investigators have hit. There's little in the way of physical evidence, save for a single hair found on Lance's abdomen.
Other than the pubic hair that was found on Lance Herndon's body, the police investigators found very little direct evidence to link the murder.
But that single hair, combined with the apparently intimate nature of the crime, has investigators angling to speak to just one person, Lance's girlfriend, Dionne Baugh.
I think they ended up focusing on Dionne Baugh reasonably quickly. Lance was a person that she was admitted to being sexually active with.
Locating her at home in Norcross, investigators informed Dionne of her lover's death.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Here to advise you that Lance Herndon has passed.
She's crying, she's hysterical, she collapses in the yard. She's hysterical on the ground, screaming about Lance.
Although Dionne seems genuinely devastated, detectives still have a few questions and bring her into the station for a formal interview. Once at the station, detectives take a much more aggressive stance.
They interrogated Dionne for hours, and she denied that she had anything to do with it.
She painted her relationship with Lance as a rosy one, that they had a great relationship.
Dionne admits to police that she saw Lance the evening he was killed, but Dionne claims they got together at her house, not at Lance's estate. Dionne's statement also explains where the missing laptop went.
She acknowledges that he had dropped by and brought her his laptop computer because she needed to use it for her schoolwork. And the time frame that she gave was between 9 and 10:30 p.m. that night.
According to Dionne, Lance wanted desperately to spend the night with her, but she needed to study.
Lance wanted to stay with her, according to Dionne, and she was devastated that she didn't spend that last night with him.
I've gone over in my mind so many times, I wish I'd let him stay with me. I wish I'd let him stay with me.
Based on Dionne's statement, investigators believe she is telling the truth. And given the fact that they weren't married, Dion has no apparent motive to murder her lover.
He was probably worth more to her alive than dead.
But just as they are wrapping up the interview, Dion reveals a piece of shocking information.
Did you know many of his friends?
No, and I purposely wanted it that way, so I didn't want people to see me with him and knowing that I was married. I did that for my own protection.
Police were shocked. Dion was married. She was married to a man named Sean Nelson, a Jamaican pilot, and they had had a daughter who was 4 years old.
He lived in Jamaica, but even still, he and Dion continued their relationship. It was a commuter relationship.
He loved Dion. He was faithful to Dion, and he thought that she was faithful to him.
But during her interview with police, Dion admits that over time, Sean began to suspect she was seeing someone behind his back, someone wealthy.
He comes in town, he discovers that his wife has some designer clothing and is now driving a brand new car.
He knew she couldn't afford that, and I think they realized that she had to have a sugar daddy somewhere.
Dion says the situation came to a head shortly before Lance's death.
Yes, who is this?
There was one point where Sean had come in from Jamaica to visit Dion, and the phone rang, and it was Lance calling Dion.
Sean starts asking, "Who are you?" And Lance is asking him, "Who are you?"
This is her husband, Sean.
Wait a minute. Dion.
A fight started over the phone, and I think Lance said something pretty aggressive, like, "You better watch your back," or something. And apparently, Sean was really, really afraid.
The fact that Dion's husband, Sean, knew about her affair shoots him to the top of the suspect list.
Sean would have also been a natural suspect because he could have just either murdered Lance himself or hired someone to do it.
But in order to speak to Dion's husband, investigators must venture into international waters, where a few, even more sinister secrets lay hidden beneath the surface.
Don't see murder cases like this. A real, honest-to-God whodunit is actually pretty rare these days.
In the posh suburbs of Atlanta, millionaire businessman Lance Herndon and his Jamaican lover Dion Baugh shared a life few could imagine.
He wanted to just open up Atlanta to her, so he took her out. He spent a lot of money, and he courted her, and she responded to that.
But when Lance is found brutally murdered in his own bedroom, investigators question Dion and learn the couple's relationship wasn't everything it appeared to be.
Dion was actually married. She had a husband named Sean who lived in Jamaica with their 4-year-old daughter.
This is Sean.
Not only that, but according to Dion, shortly before the murder, Lance and her husband had a heated exchange.
Don't ever call my house again.
Maybe I won't call. Maybe I'll just come over there. How about that?
Don't ever call my house again.
Within this conversation, between the screaming and yelling, threats were made.
Dion also informs police that Sean was actually in town the day of the murder.
Sean had been in Atlanta visiting Dion just before the murder. How ironic that he left for Jamaica the evening Lance was killed.
Police are anxious to talk to Sean Nelson, but Dion explains that Sean technically still lives in Jamaica.
Once an unalibied suspect leaves the country, concrete leads may quickly deteriorate. Continuing the investigation brings on legal, economic, and time constraints.
But with the help of Sean's airline employer, detectives are able to track him down. They make the trip to Jamaica to interview Sean at his home.
Can I help you?
The investigation was very thorough. They did go to Jamaica. They interviewed her husband down there, found out a lot about what happened.
Sean readily admits his wife's affair left a bitter taste in his mouth, but he's adamant he had nothing to do with Lance's death.
I hated him. I hate what he did to my family.
As detectives continue their conversation, it becomes evident Sean couldn't have committed the crime.
Time of death indicates Lance was killed sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. By this time, Sean was already heading back to Jamaica. In fact, he had already landed.
Thank you very much.
With their investigation at a standstill, detectives reach out to friends and family for more information about their victim. In doing so, they unearth another unexpected surprise. Turns out Dion wasn't the only one juggling multiple lovers. Not by a long shot.
They said that they couldn't keep up with the amount of people that he was sleeping with.
Lance had a harem of women, and he saw women as objects and someone that he could lay with, play with, and when he was finished, he would put them aside and he'd pick up the next one.
But in Lance Herndon's binders full of women, one appears to stand out. A gorgeous brunette named Kathy Connor he met at a party.
Kathy was beautiful. She knew how to stand, how to sit. Very classy lady, and he enjoyed having Kathy on his arm.
But it's not Kathy's good looks that pique investigators' interest.
Police processing the scene find a picture of a woman, a beautiful woman dressed in a white gown. The woman is Kathy.
According to Lance's friends, Lance was as hot and heavy with Kathy as he was with Dion.
She had the clothes in the closet. She was allowed to stay over when other women had to leave after he was finished.
Kathy was what most would have considered his sort of trophy. If you saw Lance out at a formal event, it was probably with Kathy. She was definitely eye candy for him publicly.
Which, to investigators, explains the real reason Lance and Dion weren't living together and why they seemed to spend most of their time getting it on in the bedroom rather than hitting the town.
Kathy did not know about Dion. Dion did not know about Kathy.
Is it possible that Kathy eventually found out about Dion and murdered Lance in a jealous rage?
Obviously, Lance had cheated on her quite a bit, so she would have been a natural suspect as well.
But detectives don't have to wait long for a chance to speak with Kathy. 1 week into the investigation, she storms into the police station.
She sashays in, she sits down, and she's mad. She's upset because the police have not allowed her to go back into the home to get her clothes. So the police are thinking this woman is more concerned about her expensive clothes than she is her boyfriend.
Investigators cut to the chase.
So where were you that night?
She tells them that she was going to spend the night with another millionaire.
Detectives look into Kathy's story and determine she did indeed spend the evening with her other lover, another of Atlanta's wealthiest black businessmen.
Police were able to verify everything that Kathy said, so she was ruled out.
With Kathy Connor in the clear, investigators turn to the next woman on Lance Herndon's overflowing Rolodex of lovers. One who appears to be the wildest and perhaps most lethal of them all.
Lance would lend her to his friends. She basically would do anything that he asked of her in exchange for financial gain.
In a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, detectives are on the hunt for the killer of wealthy businessman Lance Herndon. And after running down a pair of rival girlfriends and one jealous husband, they're now focusing on the millionaire playboy's vast portfolio of lovers.
I think it's probably fair to say that Lance's bedroom had a revolving door.
The suspect pool for the investigation involved mostly all women.
But in speaking to Lance's friends and family, there's one name in that pool that keeps popping up: Lance's part-time assistant, Lacey Brown.
It was reputed that they had a romantic or sexual relationship that was ongoing for quite some time.
Investigators ask Lacey to come by the station for an interview. Lacey agrees, but when she arrives, she's not alone.
Lacey knew that her story might be questioned, so she showed up. She had an attorney.
Obviously, as her counsel, we're going to reserve the right to stop this interrogation or interview at any point in time.
Some people may look at the fact that Lacey showed up to the interrogation with a lawyer as partly guilt.
First initial question is, what kind of relation did you have with him?
It was sexual as well, just purely sexual.
Okay, and when's the last time you seen him?
Actually, the night that he was murdered.
Lacey tells the police that she was with Lance on the night of the murder.
He was sleeping with Lacey. She could have killed Lance.
But Lacey insists she's innocent of any crime. She says she left Lance's house around 10 p.m. on the night in question, with Lance very much alive at the time. Lacey also claims she spoke with Lance again via phone shortly after she arrived home.
They chatted for just a bit, and when she hung up, around 10:30 or 11 or so, that was the last time she spoke with him.
Investigators are puzzled. Lacey Brown's alibi places her with Lance Herndon at the exact same time another potential suspect claimed to be with Lance, Dion Baugh.
Dion said he had dropped by and brought her his laptop computer because she needed to use it for her schoolwork. And the time frame that she gave was between 9 and 10:30 p.m. that night.
Not only does Lacey's alibi conflict with Dion Baugh's, but Lacey also claims that Lance was still using his laptop when she left that night, which further contradicts Dion's story that Lance dropped the laptop off with her around 10 p.m.
Lacey and Dion both say that they were with Lance at the same time. Obviously, that's not possible. Somebody is lying.
Investigators decide the best way to figure out who's telling the truth is to take a closer look at both women. In doing so, they uncover a startling report detailing an incident that occurred at Lance Herndon's estate just 1 month prior to his death. An incident involving Dion Baugh and another of Lance's lovers, Kathy Connor.
Dion had been calling Lance throughout the day, and he was not responding to her calls. And so at some point, she decided just to show up at his house. And unfortunately, they both got a big surprise.
When she got there, she looked in the window and she saw Lance and Kathy inside the home.
What are you doing?
Kathy knows nothing about Dion. She has no idea who this woman is. And Dion doesn't know who Kathy is. She thinks she's the only one.
Open the door, I need to talk to you!
No!
Please!
No!
Lance found himself in a predicament here that he had created all by himself. Well, he couldn't tell Kathy who Dion was, and so he had to play this off as some kind of stalker or intruder, and as a result, he called the police.
Hey, there's somebody knocking at my door, and it might be like an ex-girlfriend or whatever. Mm-hmm. And to give me some problems.
Okay, send somebody out there and have them leave the premises, okay?
They arrested her. They took her away. And I believe that Dion was charged with trespassing and resisting arrest.
But the following morning, perhaps out of guilt, Lance bailed Dion out of jail.
He told Dion that he was going to go to court on her behalf and that he was going to try and get her exonerated of the charges.
They had some trust issues after that moment. They continued to see one another, but I think Lance was walking on eggshells with her, and I think that she no longer trusted Lance.
With so many conflicting stories and a laundry list of jilted lovers, detectives turn their attention to the sole piece of forensic evidence at their disposal: the pubic hair recovered from Lance Herndon's body.
Because Lance was sleeping with several women, the investigators took DNA samples from 3 of the women that Lance had been with: Lacey, Dion, and Kathy. It was obvious that some DNA would be found on his body. The question was, whose DNA would it be?
Millionaire playboy Lance Herndon has been brutally bludgeoned to death by an unknown assailant. Police have learned that Lance's red-hot love triangle with Kathy Connor and Dion Baugh exploded just weeks before his death, when Dion dropped by his home unannounced.
When she arrived and looked in the window and apparently created a scene in which he wouldn't go to the door, and he just called police and they arrested her.
Okay, officer, I'll go.
But following Dion's arrest, Lance bailed her out and promised to have the charges against her dropped.
What he really did was he set in motion a series of events that led to his own murder.
Either the live-in girlfriend who's grown tired of her $1 million gigolo, or the Jamaican beauty he's groomed to Atlanta socialite status. Which of these women had more reason to orchestrate his murder?
Adding to the intrigue is the fact that a third woman, Lance's assistant, Lacey Brown, has also admitted to sleeping with him and has been placed at Lance's house the night of the crime.
How does one get to the bottom of this case? We have 3 scorned women, all with plausible motivation to commit murder.
But a single hair found at the crime scene may just crack this case wide open. Weeks into the investigation, detectives received the results from the state crime lab.
The DNA test actually came back that it was a match to Dion Bow.
With this confirmation, police are confident Dion is the killer. Later that day, Dion Baugh is charged with the murder of her lover, Lance Herndon. News of the arrest and of the victim's posh address make waves all over the city of Atlanta.
A lot of people were very fascinated by who the victim was, what kind of lifestyle he had. That generated a lot of interest.
That interest reaches a crescendo at Dion's trial.
An African-American millionaire playboy murdered. This case impacted both the have and have-nots in the city. Everyone wanted to know how this case would play out.
Prosecutors opened by laying out Dion's alleged motive. After catching Lance with Kathy Connor, Dion feared Lance was planning to put an end to both the relationship and with it, Dion's lavish lifestyle.
The prosecutor theory was he was basically going to dump her, take his car back, take everything back.
Prosecutors claim Dion also feared Lance was going to renege on his promise to have the trespassing charges against her dropped.
Lance always had his day scheduled on his computer. When Dion looked on the computer and didn't see her court date on his calendar, she went into a rage. That was the ultimate rejection.
Prosecutors claim that in order to carry out the crime, Dion plied Lance with the one thing he could never say no to.
Dion, what are you doing here?
Sex.
I know you miss me.
The way the state contended the murder occurred was that Dion had sex with Lance. Lance went to sleep, that Dion started going through a computer and saw that Lance had not scheduled to go to the hearing on the misdemeanor, criminal battery, and that this enraged Dion.
She straddled him in his bed as he slept, and she bludgeoned him to death at a minimum of 12 times.
To support their claim, prosecutors introduced the hair they found on Lance's dead body, the hair that DNA testing proves belongs to Dion.
Certainly the strongest evidence that the prosecution had was the DNA evidence.
But when it's their turn, Dion's attorneys take aim at the DNA evidence.
There was no doubt that Dion Baugh was having a love affair with Lance Herndon. Of course there's going to be DNA evidence in his bed.
They dated, they were intimate, and he could have rolled around and it could have been stuck to his body.
The prosecution counters by submitting the report from the incident that took place 1 month prior to the murder, which they say clearly paints Dion as a vindictive and potentially violent person.
Dion's arrest at Lance's home made her appear very angry. So angry that she was attempting to force her way inside his home. This displayed anger showed her ability to act out violently.
In addition to the incident report, prosecutors call one of the case's lead investigators to the stand, who recounts a slew of unflattering stories about Dion. Many of them relayed to him by her and Lance's friends and family.
Investigator Anastasio's comments to the witnesses were based on the type of person Dion was, rather than if the individual was there to commit murder. Most witnesses felt Dion was crazy, a person that couldn't be trusted, so therefore she had to commit the murder.
Lieutenant Anastasio testified to a lot of information that he heard from other parties, from the neighbors of Dion Bow, from people who knew Dion Bow, and from people who knew Lance Herndon.
Defense lawyers are outraged that the judge has allowed such testimony.
It was blatantly hearsay, it was bolstering, it was a violation of the evidentiary rules.
If the prosecution wanted to introduce the evidence of those people, he should call those witnesses to the stand.
But the judge allows the detective's words to stand. With their backs against the ropes, the defense tries to chip away at Dion's alleged motive.
Criminal trespass, which is only a misdemeanor, is a small crime. It didn't make sense that that would lead Dion to kill Lance because he'd reneged on a misdemeanor agreement.
As for the jealousy motive, the defense argues that given Lance's voracious sexual appetite, the line of women who might want to exact some sort of revenge against him is long.
There are all these women who'd been jilted over the years, and he's got so many women bouncing back and forth every night. There were lots of people who had the ability to actually have been the perpetrator in the case.
After tackling the motive, the defense hammers away at the lack of physical evidence connecting Dion to the crime.
There's nothing that directly links her to that scene at the moment of the murder.
Nor is there a murder weapon implicating Dion.
They didn't find it. I believe, in fact, that they attempted to dig up the backyard of her home and went back there and went to her home and never found anything.
The defense's case is so solid, the seeds of doubt so strong, it seems a guilty verdict is all but impossible.
Just the fact that Dion's hair was found on Lance was not going to be sufficient to convince a jury that she was guilty. It wasn't enough evidence.
Which makes the legal thunderbolt that strikes next all the more shocking.
I've tried a lot of murder cases in the last 32 years. This is unusual. It's not the normal way in which your trial ends.
The case was certainly shocking. We were shocked by the jury.
After 2 weeks of testimony, Dion Ball's murder trial for the death of her Playboy lover, Lance Herndon, is drawing to a close. In a case based almost solely on circumstantial evidence, a guilty verdict seems far from certain.
And the defense had a strong argument for reasonable doubt.
No murder weapon, no one actually putting Dion in Lance's home the evening he was killed.
Dion's fate now rests in the hands of the jury. After only a couple of hours of deliberation, they announce they've reached a verdict. They find Dion Ball guilty of murder.
She was convicted of murder, and in Georgia, that's an automatic life sentence.
It was a compliment to the prosecutor because all they had tying Dion Ball to the crime was a hair and some DNA on a person that she had admitted to being sexually active with.
Dion was very cool during the entire trial, but when the verdict was handed down, she wept.
Outraged over what he feels was inadmissible testimony on the part of Detective Anastasio, defense attorney Don Samuel appeals the verdict.
It's not proper to call a policeman to the stand and have him simply repeat what witnesses told him. That's hearsay.
With Dion locked up in prison, the appeal eventually makes its way to the Georgia Supreme Court.
It took well over a year for the Supreme Court to decide the case. She was very hopeful of getting a new trial, insisted on her innocence throughout.
On July 10th, 2003, 2 years after her sentencing, the Georgia Supreme Court announces their decision. The jury's original verdict is overturned.
And the Supreme Court agreed with the defense. And so they sent the case back for retrial.
As in the first trial, Dion's defense team attacks the lack of physical evidence. But this time, they also launch a full-on assault on Lance Herndon's character.
During the second trial, the defense was able to puncture Lance's character even more and create a broader landscape of enemies that he may have had.
Usually it is the advantage of the defense to have a second trial because you've learned all the state's secrets by then.
Still, everyone in the jury believes Dion to be guilty, except for one.
There was one juror who just couldn't find it in their heart to find her guilty.
And that's all it takes. All it takes is one hung juror, and you're not acquitted, but you're also not convicted. So the trial ends, and everybody goes home. You start over again.
The prospect of a third trial takes its toll on everyone, including Lance Herndon's family.
They were tired of hearing Lance Herndon being kind of dragged through the mud. So the prosecutors said, let's see if we can reach a settlement that everybody can live with. And that's what happened.
Dion was floated an offer by the state of voluntary manslaughter with a sentence of 10 years in prison.
Having served 2 years while her case was on appeal, Dion takes the deal.
She decided to cut her losses. In one case, she was convicted, and another time she had a mistrial. And she didn't want to roll the dice one more time and took the 10 years.
In July of 2011, after completing her sentence, Dion Ball walks out of jail a free woman. But questions about her guilt or innocence linger to this day.
I wouldn't stake my life on the fact that Dion was the killer in this case. There was just too many question marks.
And while the truth of what really happened that fateful night in Lance Herndon's opulent master suite remains a mystery, one thing is for certain. Playing fast and loose with the hearts of so many comes at a price not even the wealthiest among us can afford to pay.
He loved being with women. He loved giving gifts. He loved spending the night with them. I don't think he was mean. I don't think he was cruel. So he doesn't deserve what happened. But his lifestyle causes, unfortunately, a lot of unhappiness in other people.
For pounds, Rodney Reed from the official document, plus interest. You had to mention the for quid, didn't you? Dell groaned, slumped in his armchair. And the interest. You've upset Raquel now. Raquel was indeed upset. She was looking at the small kitchen, the place where she had once hoped she'd never have to cook a budget omelet again. What does it mean? Derek, truly. It means they can take the flat, Dell said, his voice unusually small. Anything of value? Not that we've got much left besides the peacock pattern curtains. Trigger said they're recruiting down at the depot, Raquel suggested quietly. Road sweeping. The pay isn't bad. Dell looked at her as if she'd suggested he sell his own kidneys. Me, a trotter, sweeping the streets. I'm a trader. Raquel, I've been trading since I was 12. I could sell sand to the Arabs and ice to the Eskimos. You currently couldn't sell water to a man in a desert. Dell, Rodney pointed out. But Dell's mind was already whirring. The bankruptcy meant he couldn't run a company, but it didn't say he couldn't work for one. He just needed a front man, a fall guy, a managing director who looked good in a suit and didn't mind a bit of administrative flexibility. He looked at Rodney. Rodders, my old son, how would you like to be the new boss of Trotter's Independent Traders? Rodney's eyes narrowed. No, absolutely not. I know that look. That's the look you gave me before we tried to sell those unbreakable lawnmowers that exploded. This is different. It's legal. Mostly. You run the firm. I act as a consultant. Sales, purchasing. Finance, you just sign the checks and take the glory. And the prison sentence? There won't be a prison sentence. Trust me, this time next year. Don't say it, Dell. Don't you dare say it. Chapter 6, The Gold Rush. The weeks that followed were a blur of consultancy. Dell was back on the streets, trying to move stock that was slightly damaged or potentially authentic. But the debt loomed like a thundercloud. One evening, while watching the telly, a bright, garish show caught Dell's eye. Gold Rush, hosted by the floppy-haired and fast-talking Jonathan Ross. "Look at this, Rodney," Dell said, pointing at the screen. $100 grand for answering a few questions. I could do that. I'm a man of the world. I've got culture. Dell, last night one of the questions was, who introduced the potato to England? And you said King Edward. Rodney sighed. It was a trick question. I didn't hear it properly. You need to be fast, Dell, and you need to be smart. I am smart. I'm the smartest bloke in Peckham. I'm going on that show. I've already sent the application. While Dell prepared for his television debut, Rodney and Cassandra were dealing with their own vibrant venture, their marriage. The stress of the financial collapse had taken its toll. They were living in the flat, under the constant surveillance of Dell, Raquel, and a very loud Damien. "We need space, Rodney," Cassandra whispered one night. "We need a spark." Rodney had a plan. He had been reading a magazine, a serious man's magazine about psychological healing, fantasy therapy. He explained, iconoclastic autosuggestion. We become different people for a night. We unload the memory baggage. Does it involve dressing up? Cassandra asked, her voice skeptical. No. Well, maybe a little, but it's all about the subconscious. The plan was set. They would have an evening alone while Dell took the others out. Rodney had chosen his persona, Russell Crowe from Gladiator. Cassandra had chosen hers, a policewoman from The Bill. However, in the Trotter household, plans were merely suggestions. Dell's night out was canceled, and he returned home to find Rodney in a leather tunic and Cassandra in a high-visibility vest. Fancy dress party? Dell asked, eyeing Rodney's sandals. Yes, Rodney lied, his face reddening. Very early one for Cassandra's ex-boss. Right. Well, you look lovely, Cassandra. Very authoritative. And you, Rodney, you look like Spartacus with a digestive problem. Anyway, off you go. Borrow the Capri. Chapter 7, The Studio Lights. The night of gold rush arrived. The BBC studios were a hive of activity, smelling of floor wax and ambition. Dell was in the makeup chair, having his forehead buffed to a high shine. You look nervous, Mr. Trotter, the makeup artist remarked. Nervous? Me? I've dealt with the Triads in Limehouse and the Inland Revenue in Peckham. This is a walk in the park. Creme de la menthe, darling. On stage, Jonathan Ross was warming up the crowd. And finally, we have Derek Trotter from Peckham, a man of fine wines, the theater, and 16th century Italian Renaissance art. Dell walked out, waving to an imaginary fan club. He felt the heat of the lights and the weight of the 50,000 pounds dead on his shoulders. This wasn't just a game. It was a rescue mission. The first rounds were a blur. Dell used his fastest finger, which was usually reserved for counting cash, to stay in the game. He guessed his way through questions about geography and history, narrowly avoiding a disaster regarding the height of Kilimanjaro. I thought Fuji made cameras. Del quipped to a laughing audience. He was winning them over. The Peckham Charmer was in full effect. But then came the green question, 25,000 pounds. In which state was President Kennedy born? Ross asked. Dill's brain froze. He remembered the motorcade. He remembered the tragedy. He was in a terrible state. Jonathan. He died. The audience roared, but Ross shook his head. I need a U.S. state. Del, Texas, Florida, or California. Del panicked. He used his shot in the dark. Florida. No, it was Texas. You're frozen out. Del. But the game wasn't over. There was the penalty question. The chance to jump to the 100,000 pounds gold question. How many wheels does a Reliant Robin have? 3. Del shouted before the question was even finished. Correct. Now, for 50,000 pounds and a chance at the gold. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and the Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Del felt the world spinning. Classical music. He knew the Birdie song and most of Cha's and Dave's discography. But this was the highbrow stuff he'd always pretended to know. I'm going to use my AOS, Del declared. I'm calling my brother. Rodney, he's got to GCEs. You know, he's the brains of the operation. Chapter 8, The Call. Back at the flat, Rodney was still in his gladiator gear, trying to salvage the remains of his fantasy therapy night. The phone rang. If that's Mickey Pierce again, I'll kill him, Rodney muttered, picking up the receiver. Hello, Rodney. This is Jonathan Ross at the Gold Rush Studio. Oh, piss off, Mickey. You're getting on my tits now. Rodney, no, it's really me. I've got Derek here. Rodney froze. He heard the studio audience. He heard Dill's frantic voice. Rodders, help me. The opera, The Child and the Enchantment, Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo. Rodney's mind raced back to his school days, to a music appreciation class he'd actually attended. Ravel. Del, it's Ravel. 100%. You sure, Rodney? I'm certain. I know my classics. Del turned to the camera, his confidence restored. It's Ravel, Jonathan. My brother knows his onions. There was a pause, a long, agonizing silence. Derek, Jonathan Ross said, his voice dripping with sympathy. That was the wrong answer. It was Segovia. What? Del screamed. But Rodney said. Rodney was wrong. You've lost everything, Del. But here's a pound so you don't go home empty-handed. Chapter 9, The Aftermath. The silence in the flat when Del returned was deafening. He walked in, looking like a man who had been through a car wash without the car. Raquel was waiting. Damien was asleep. Rodney and Cassandra were sitting on the sofa, looking guilty. I went out, Dell said simply, dropping the 1-pound coin on the table. I'm sorry, Dell, Rodney whispered. I could have sworn it was Ravel. Ravel makes shoes, Rodney, Dell snapped. Everyone knows that. It was a trick question and you fell for it. But, don't butt me. You've embarrassed the family. You've embarrassed the nation. I'm going to bed. But sleep didn't come. The phone rang again an hour later. Dell answered it, expecting another prank from Mickey Pierce. Hello. Yes, this is Derek Trotter. What? No, you're joking. Dell's face changed. The despair evaporated, replaced by a slow, spreading grin. What is it, Dell? Raquel asked, coming into the room. Dell hung up the phone, his eyes sparkling. That was the producer. They made a mistake. The researcher got the cards mixed up. It was Ravel. No, Rodney gasped. Yes, they're giving me the 50,000 pounds, and they want me back on the show for the gold question. The room erupted. Rodney cheered, Cassandra hugged Raquel, and even Damien woke up and started jumping on the sofa. Dell stood in the center of the chaos, the 1-pound coin in his hand. He looked at his family, his loyal, crazy, bankrupt, beautiful family. I told you, didn't I? Dell said, his voice full of the old bravado. The Peckham Phoenix. We're back. Rodney, this time next year. Don't say it, Dell. Rodney laughed. Mange tout, Dell whispered. Wink at the ceiling. Where a ghost in a sailor's cap was surely raising a glass of rum. Mange tout. Chapter 10. The Weight of the Gold. The days leading up to the grand finale of Gold Rush were unlike anything Peckham had ever seen. Del Boy wasn't just a local trader anymore. He was a folk hero. At the Nag's Head, Boyke had already started offering odds-on success, while Trigger spent most of his time asking if Dave was going to be the phone-a-friend again. I'm telling you, Boyke, Del said, leaning against the bar with a celebratory cognac. The stars are aligned. It's destiny. The Trotter name is about to be etched in the annals of television history. Just make sure it's not the annals of the bankruptcy court again. Del. Boyke retorted with his trademark nasally laugh. 100,000 pounds is a lot of money. The inland revenue is probably already sharpening their pencils. Del's confidence was a fragile thing, hidden behind layers of cheap gold and expensive-sounding French phrases. He spent his evenings at the flat, surrounded by piles of encyclopedias he had borrowed and promised to return from the local library. Raquel and Rodney were his coaches, firing questions at him until his brain felt like it had been through a blender. Right, Del, Rodney said, holding a book on British history. Who was the prime minister during the Suez Crisis? Easy, Del replied, buffing a gold ring on his shirt. Lord Nelson. Rodney groaned. No, Del, Anthony Eden, we've been over this 5 times. Well, they both sound like they own a pub, don't they? It's a confusing subject, Rodney. It's not like trading. In trading, you know where you stand. You either have the gear or you don't. But the pressure was mounting. Cassandra had already started looking at brochures for new houses, and the thought of letting them all down again was a heavy burden. Chapter 11, the final countdown. The night of the finale arrived with the intensity of a championship boxing match. The Trotter family was back in the front row, eyes glued to the stage. Jonathan Ross walked out to a standing ovation, looking more colorful than usual. And tonight, Ross announced the moment we've all been waiting for. The return of the man who knows his classical guitarists better than his brother does, Derek Trotter. Del walked out, his suit pressed to perfection. He looked at Raquel and gave a small, nervous thumbs up. This was it. One question between him and 100,000 pounds. Now, Derek, Ross said, the tone becoming serious. You have the 50,000 pounds from the Ravel error. You can walk away now and pay off your debts. Or you can risk it all for the gold question. 100,000 pounds. What's it to be? The audience was silent. Rodney was holding his breath so hard he was turning blue. Del looked at the camera, then at his family. I'm a trader, Jonathan, Del said, his voice steady. And a trader never walks away from a big deal. Let's play for the gold. The lights dimmed to a deep, shimmering yellow. The gold-themed music pulsed through the studio. For 100,000 pounds, Derek, here is your question. In the world of high-end horology, specifically the 18th century, who is credited with the invention of the marine chronometer, a device that revolutionized sea travel? A collective gasp went up from the front row. Rodney's eyes went wide. Raquel gripped Cassandra's hand. Del blinked. Horology? 18th century? Marine chronometer? Is it a Thomas Tompion, B. John Harrison, or C. George Graham? Del felt a strange sensation, like a voice from the past whispering in his ear. He remembered a dusty box in a garage. He remembered a worthless old watch that Rodney had almost thrown away. He remembered the watch that had made them millionaires the first time. John Harrison, Del whispered, I need you to speak up. Derek, Ross said. Del stood taller. The answer is John Harrison. I know it, Jonathan. I know it in my bones. Ross looked at his card. He looked at the audience. He waited for what felt like an eternity. Derek Trotter, you are 100,000 pound winner. Chapter 12, A Peckham Legend. The celebration at the Nag's Head was the stuff of legends. The champagne flowed like water. And even Boyke bought around something that hadn't happened since the late 70s. To Derek, Mike cried out, having been released on bail pending his appeal. The only man who can go bankrupt and become a millionaire twice in one lifetime. Del was in his element, surrounded by friends, holding a check that looked like it could pay for half of Peckham. He looked at Rodney, who was surprisingly quiet. "What's up, Rodders?" Dell asked, putting an arm around his brother. "We've done it. The flat is safe. The debt is gone. We've got to tidy some left over. I was just thinking about the watch, Dell," Rodney said, smiling. "John Harrison's watch. It saved us once. And now it's saved us again. It's like Uncle Albert is still looking out for us." Dell nodded, his eyes misting over for a second. "Yeah, he always said he had a feeling about that watch. He'd be proud of us. Rodney, he'd probably tell us a story about how he once sold a chronometer to a Russian submarine during the war. But he'd be proud." As the night wound down, Dell walked out onto the balcony of Nelson Mandela House one last time before their move to a better place. The three-wheeled van sat in the parking lot below, reflecting the orange glow of the street lights. "You know, Raquel," Dell said, pulling her close, "life's a bit like a game show. You win some, you lose some. But as long as you got the right people around you, you're always on a winner." Raquel smiled and kissed him on the cheek. "What now, Derek?" Dell looked out over the skyline of his city, the gold rings on his hand catching the moonlight. Now we start the next venture. I've heard there's a massive market for these new eco-friendly solar-powered umbrellas. They're going to be huge, darling, huge." Chapter 13, Moving Day and New Ambitions. The move from Nelson Mandela House was bittersweet. For 30 years, those concrete walls had heard every scheme, every argument, and every "this time next year" speech. As the Trotters packed the last of their meager belongings, now supplemented by a few high-end gadgets bought with the gold rush winnings, the atmosphere was one of quiet triumph. "I'm going to miss the view," Dell lied, looking out at the sprawling gray estate. "What view, Dell? The burnt-out bins or the graffiti on the stairwell?" Rodney asked, hoisting a box of vinyl records. "Character, Rodney. It's called character. Still, onwards and upwards." Their new residence wasn't exactly a mansion in the Caribbean, but it was a substantial house in a quiet, leafy part of London, the kind of place where people actually mowed their lawns and didn't leave abandoned cars in the driveway. Dell had managed to negotiate a favorable price, mostly by charming the estate agent with stories of his international consultancy firm. But Del Boy couldn't stay quiet for long. The £100,000 had cleared the debt and provided a safety net, but the trader's itch was back. He had already set up his new headquarters in the garage, which he insisted on calling the Innovation Hub. "Look at these, Rodney," Dell said, opening a crate of the solar-powered umbrellas he'd mentioned. "It's the future. Green energy, sustainability. It's what the kids are into." Rodney inspected one. "Dell, it's an umbrella with a solar panel on top. What does the solar panel do? It powers a small fan inside the handle Dell explained, beaming, to keep you cool while you're staying dry. And it's got a built-in LED light so you can see where you're walking in the dark. In the rain, in London, Rodney raised an eyebrow. When it's raining, it's usually cloudy. No sun, Dell. No sun means no solar power. It stores the energy. You dipstick. It's got a battery. It charges up on those rare sunny days. And then, boom, cool breeze and illumination in the middle of a November downpour. Rodney sighed. And how much did you pay for these? A bargain. Monkey Harris had a contact in Shenzhen. We've got 500 units. We're going to corner the market. Chapter 14, The Solar Storm. Selling solar umbrellas in a British winter proved to be exactly as difficult as Rodney had predicted. Dell spent weeks trying to convince market traders and boutique owners that the Solar Brella 3000 was the must-have accessory of the season. It's a lifestyle statement. Dell shouted to a shivering crowd at the Peckham Market. Stay cool, stay dry, and stay green. Only 20 quid. You can't afford not to buy one. A woman in a thick coat stopped. Does the fan work in the rain? Absolutely, madam. It creates a microclimate of refreshing air beneath the canopy. She bought one, then another. Slowly, the Solar Brella started to gain a strange kind of cult following. Maybe it was the LED light, which was actually quite useful for finding keys in the dark. Or maybe it was just those sheer persistence. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A viral video of a local celebrity using one during a red carpet event, mostly because it was the only umbrella they could find in a hurry, sparked a minor trend. Suddenly, the Innovation Hubindle's garage was a hive of activity. Rotters, we're down to the last 50, Dell shouted, frantic. Call Monkey. We need more. The demand is unprecedented. Rodney was actually impressed. I don't believe it. You've actually done it again. You've sold ice to the Eskimos. Or rather, sun power to the British. That's the Trotter touch. My boy, Dell said, puffing on a celebratory cigar. We don't just sell products, we sell dreams. Chapter 15, The Legacy of the Trotters. As the year drew to a close, the Trotter family gathered for a housewarming party in their new home. Even Boyke and Marlene had turned up. Boyke spending most of his time checking the quality of the floorboards and making snide comments about the new money. Quite a step up from the council flat. Dell, Boyke said, sipping a drink. I suppose you'll be wanting an invite to the golf club next. Already on the waiting list, Boyke, Dell replied with a grin. I've got a set of clubs coming in from a contact. Gold-plated. Very exclusive. Raquel and Cassandra were in the kitchen, laughing about the chaos of the move. Damien was playing with a remote-controlled car in the hallway, his childhood now firmly rooted in comfort rather than struggle. Rodney found Dell standing by the window, looking out at the garden. You okay, Del? Yeah, just thinking. About Mom, about Granddad, and Albert. Del's voice was soft. They'd have like this place. No more draughty windows or broken elevators. They'd be proud, Del, Rodney said, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder. You've always looked after us, even when you were selling one-legged stockings or exploding lawnmowers. Del laughed. Hey, those lawnmowers had a lot of power, just a bit of a temperamental ignition system. They stood there for a moment, to brothers who had been through everything together, the highs of the Caribbean, the lows of bankruptcy, and the madness of television game shows. You know, Rodney, Del said, turning back to the party, life's a funny old thing. You can lose everything in a heartbeat. But as long as you've got your family and a bit of dodge, you're never truly down. I know, Del, I know. And listen, I've been thinking about the next project. There's this bloke in Lewisham who's developed a way to turn old tea bags into high-protein animal feed. It's revolutionary. Rotters, the agricultural sector, won't know what hit it. Rodney closed his eyes and smiled. Mange tout, Del, Rodney whispered. Mange tout. Chapter 16, The Brew of Champions. The innovation hub soon smelled less like ozone and more like an overgrown compost heap. Del's new venture turning used tea bags into turbo brew protein pellets for cattle was in full swing. He had secured a strategic partnership with several local cafes, meaning he collected their soggy waste in black bin liners and was now drying them out on racks in the garage. Del, it's not just the smell, Rodney complained, waving away a swarm of midges. It's the logic. Why would a cow want a high-protein diet of Earl Grey and PG tips? Antioxidants, Rodney, it's the superfood of the bovine world, Del explained, wearing a white lab coat he'd borrowed from a closed-down pharmacy. Think about it. Comp cows, better milk, posh milk. We'll sell it to Harrods as Cotswold chamomile cream. And the cows won't mind the caffeine? They'll be the most productive cows in England. We're targeting the high-end agriculturalists. Boykie's got a friend, Sir Rupert, who owns half of Kent. He's looking for green alternatives for his prize-winning heifers. Despite Rodney's misgivings, Del actually managed to secure a meeting. He arrived at Sir Rupert's estate in the three-wheeled van, which looked decidedly out of place parked next to a fleet of Range Rovers. Del, ever the salesman, presented a sample of the pellets in a velvet-lined box. It's a revolutionary blend, Sir Rupert, Del said, adopting his city broker accent. A hint of Darjeeling for stamina. A touch of peppermint for digestive harmony. We call it bovine bliss. Sir Rupert, a man whose eyebrows were the size of small rodents, looked intrigued. It certainly smells. Unique. If it improves the coat of my Highland cows, I might be interested in a substantial order. Chapter 17, The Gala and the Grumble. To celebrate their potential entry into the world of Big Ag, Dell decided the Trotters needed to attend the upcoming charity gala at Boykey's Golf Club. It was a black tie event, the kind of place where nouveau rich met old money and everyone pretended to like the salmon mousse. I don't want to go, Dell, Rodney said, struggling with a clip-on Bodie. Those people look at me like I'm a scientific experiment gone wrong. Nonsense. You're a successful executive, Dell insisted. Just mention the Turbo Brew project. Use words like sustainable and synergy. It makes the posh lot feel warm and fuzzy. The evening started well. Dell was working the room, charming the wives of local dignitaries with his French compliments and offering investment tips that mostly involve buying wholesale textiles. Raquel looked stunning, effortlessly holding her own in conversations about the local opera society. However, the trouble started near the buffet. Dell had brought a small bag of Turbo Brew pellets in his dinner jacket pocket, intended as a taster for a skeptical farmer he'd spotted. In his enthusiasm, he accidentally knocked the bag into the club's centerpiece chocolate fountain. For 5 minutes, no one noticed. Then, a strange, earthy aroma began to permeate the ballroom. The chocolate, now infused with the essence of 300 recycled tea bags, took on a muddy, gritty texture. Good Lord, Sir Rupert exclaimed, dabbing his lip with a silk handkerchief. Is this chocolate, Earl Grey flavored? And why is it so crunchy? Dell froze, seeing the telltale tea leaves floating in the brown sludge. It's a new dessert trend from Paris. Sir Rupert, chocolate eau de recycle. Very avant-garde. The trend did not catch on. Within 10 minutes, half the club was coughing up bits of dried hibiscus and paper fiber. Chapter 18, Face-Saving and Future Schemes. The drive home was quiet, save for the occasional muffled giggle from Cassandra. Well, Rodney finally said, that's the end of Turbo Brew. Sir Rupert looked like he wanted to use your head as a golf ball. Dell sighed, loosening his tie. Yeah, it was a bit of a choker. I must admit, I didn't think the pellets would dissolve that fast. On the plus side, Raquel added, patting Dell's hand. Everyone thought it was a very brave culinary choice, and Boykey was so embarrassed that he's waived your membership fees for the next year just to keep you quiet about who invited us. Dell perked up. Really? A year's free membership? Well, every cloud, eh? The venture was a bust. But in true Trotter fashion, they hadn't lost money, they'd just gained a story and a social advantage. The black bin liners of tea bags were quietly disposed of mostly in Denzel's garden, much to his confusion, and the garage returned to being a hub for more traditional merchandise. You know, Rodney, Dell said as they sat on the patio of their new home, watching the moon rise over the suburban trees. The agricultural sector is a bit too stuck in its ways. I think we need to look into something more technological. Rodney groaned. Oh, no, not computers again. Better. I've been talking to a bloke in Surrey. He's developed a virtual reality headset for pets to stop them getting bored while the owners are at work. Imagine it. Your cat can pretend it's hunting lions in the Serengeti from the comfort of the living room rug. We'll call it feline fantasy. Rodney looked at the three-wheeled van in the driveway, its yellow paint catching the moonlight. He looked at his brother, whose eyes were already bright with the fire of a new deal. Mange tout, Dell, Rodney whispered, raising a glass of mineral water. Mange tout, Rodney, Dell replied, clinking his cognac glass, this time next year. Epilogue, the phoenix rises. The sun set over London, casting long shadows across the city. In a quiet suburb, a yellow three-wheeled van sat proudly in a paved driveway. Its Trotter's Independent Traders logo slightly faded, but still defiant. Derek Trotter wasn't just a man. He was a symbol of the eternal optimist, the man who never gave up, the trader who believed that the next big deal was just around the corner. He had won the gold, he had paid the debts, and he had built a new life. But deep down, he was still the same Del boy from the Peckham Market, a man with a dream, a suitcase, and a heart of pure gold. The Peckham Phoenix hadn't just risen from the ashes, it was currently planning its next big sale. Lovely jubbly, the wind seemed to whisper through the trees. And for the Trotters, it truly was. The Peckham Phoenix, a novelization of the Trotter Chronicles. Chapter 1, The Ghost of Millions Past. The rain in Peckham didn't fall, it surrendered. It was a gray, miserable drizzle that clung to the concrete skin of Nelson Mandela House like a damp shroud. Inside the familiar, slightly cramped confines of the Trotter flat, the air smelled of stale cigars, cheap air freshener, and the lingering scent of Uncle Albert's legendary and lethal Navy stew. Derek Delboy Trotter sat on the edge of his velvet-covered sofa, adjusted his gold rings, and looked at the man sitting across from him. The man's name was Justin Asleek, professional type with a digital recorder and a look of thinly veiled pity. So Justin began, his voice smooth as silk. I've got the basics. The watch, the auction, the £6.5 million. But I want the real story. Derek, your raison d'etre, as they say. Those eyes lit up at the French, or what he assumed was French. Raison d'etre. Oh, absolutely, Justin. Laboratory Garney. As the locals say, it means it is what it is, doesn't it? Beside him, Rodney Trotter, the younger, taller, and infinitely more anxious brother, let out a long, suffering sigh. Rodney's knees were bouncing. He looked like a man who expected a trapdoor to open beneath him at any moment. Don't mind him, Dell said. waving a hand toward Rodney. He's a bit touchy. Personal matters. Bedroom hiccups. You know how it is when the spark becomes a bit of a damp squib. Del, Rodney hissed, his face flushing a deep crimson. I told you that in confidence. And I'm not here to talk about my private life with Cassandra. I'm here because I have to be. Of course, Del soothed, though his eyes were already drifting back to the past. You want to know how we became successful? Justin, it was destiny. We were ordinary people, living ordinary lives. Until we found it, a piece of history, an antique watch that changed everything. We've thought about giving it to the British Museum, you know, for the nation. But then we thought the nation's got enough stuff, so we flogged it. The memory of the auction room still hung in the air like a golden haze. 6.5 million pounds. It was the kind of money that didn't just change lives, it rewrote them. For a few years, the Trotters weren't just traders, they were royalty. They had divvied the dosh, made sure Uncle Albert had a nice little drink, which in Albert's case meant enough cognac to preserve a whale, and set their sights on the horizon. But then, Dole's voice dropped an octave. We met the stockbroker. Chapter 2, The Tropical Storm. The downfall didn't happen in a boardroom in London. It happened in the humid, feverish markets of Central America. Del, fueled by his eternal optimism and a steady diet of business lunches that usually involved more gin than geography, had invested the Trotter birthright into a venture that promised a return the likes of which the world had never seen. It was vibrant, Del explained to Justin, his hands sketching patterns in the air. A Central American miracle. Everyone was pouring money in. We were making more money than the Royal Mint. We were flying helicopters to Nice just to pick up magazines. We were water skiing while the world turned. But the miracle was a mirage. While the Trotters, Del and Raquel, Rodney and Cassandra, and young Damien were living the high life in Barbados. The political and economic foundations of their investment were rotting. We took the whole family, Del recalled, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. Even little Damien. He was a natural. Mind you, he did once weed in the swimming pool from the top of the 4-meter board. But that's just spirit, isn't it? Character. The crash hit with the force of a hurricane. One moment, they were sipping champagne on a sun-drenched deck. The next, the credit cards were being declined. The hotel was threatening to call the police. And the business associates who had once bowed at their feet were suddenly unreachable. The internet, Rodney muttered. One button. That's all it took. The news hit the UK before we even got our suitcases packed. We went from being the Peckham millionaires to being those to plunkers in under 6 seconds. They had returned to a financial wilderness. Their homes, company-owned and lavish, were seized. Their old friends, the ones who hadn't invested, looked at them with a mix of amusement and sympathy. But for Mike Fisher, the landlord of the Nag's Head, The sympathy was short-lived. Mike had remortgaged the pub to follow Dell's lead. Now he was sitting in a cell, awaiting trial for embezzlement, having tried to recoup his losses by borrowing from the brewery. He's innocent, Dell insisted, though even he sounded unconvinced. He just misplaced the paperwork, a victim of circumstance. Chapter 3, The Empty Chair and the Wrong Grave. The return to Peckham was finalized by a tragedy that cut deeper than any bank balance. Uncle Albert, the man of 1,000 wartime stories during the war, had finally reached his final port of call. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving a hole in the family that no amount of gold could fill. He had been living with Elsie Partridge, his girlfriend, a woman Rodney claimed was present when the ribbon was cut at the opening of Stonehenge. The funeral was supposed to be a solemn affair. Dell, Rodney, Raquel, and Cassandra now living back in the cramped flat at Nelson Mandela House dressed in their finest black. I feel bad, Dell whispered as they stood in the chilly cemetery. We were off globe-trotting while he was here. We should have taken him to Barbados. He didn't have a passport, Dell, Rodney reminded him. He'd been around the world more times than a Russian satellite, but he never had a piece of paper that said he was allowed to leave the country. Good job Hitler didn't know that, or we'd have been in right trouble. They stood before a grave, Dell delivering a moving, if slightly improvised, eulogy about Albert's bravery in the RAF. He was a hero, Dell proclaimed to the small gathering. They called him Bunny because his name was Warren, a legend of the skies. It wasn't until young Damien pointed at a passing Spitfire and asked if his great-uncle was in it that a woman approached them. "Excuse me," she said, looking confused. "Who are you?" "We're the family," Dell said with dignity. "I'm Derek Trotter. This is Rodney." The woman blinked. "I think there's been a mistake. This is the funeral for Harold Smith. He was in the RAF. Albert. Warren's funeral is to Plots over, and he was in the Navy." Dell looked at the headstone, then at Rodney. The silence was deafening. "Right," Dell muttered, clearing his throat. "Best leave it till the hearse arrives, then. Come on, everyone. Move along. Nothing to see here." Chapter 4, The Court of Broken Dreams. The legal system of the United Kingdom was not designed for the flamboyant complexities of Derek Trotter. Sitting in the dock of the High Court, Dell looked less like a fallen tycoon and more like a confused magpie. The Inland Revenue was not interested in vibrant ventures or raison d'etre. They were interested in £48,754, plus interest. Rodney sat in the public gallery, his face buried in his hands. He had been exonerated of all responsibility mostly because the court determined he hadn't actually known what was going on for 90% of the time. The Inland Revenue versus Trotter's Independent Traders, the clerk announced. Dell tried his best. He spoke of foresight, of slave-like attention to detail, and of checks that were always on time, even if they did happen to bounce like rubber balls once they hit the bank. Mr. Trotter, the judge said, peering over his spectacles, "You are effectively bankrupt." Exonerated, Dell whispered to his lawyer. Bankrupt, the lawyer corrected. They returned to the flat in a daze. Raquel was waiting, her face etched with worry. "So," she asked. "No prison," Dell said, trying to find a silver lining. "Not yet, anyway. But we've got a year to pay off the debt, or they take the goods, everything of value." "Well, that won't take long," Rodney muttered, looking around the living room. "We haven't got anything of value, except this flat. And the council owns that. No one's even looked at it in 5 years because Dell had it priced as if it were a penthouse in Mayfair. I was trading on its potential," Dell snapped. "And I'm still a trader. I've been trading since I was 12. I could sell rice to the Chinese. I just need a new angle." "The firm's liquidated, Dell," Raquel said softly. "You're disqualified from running it." Dell's eyes narrowed. A familiar spark, the one Rodney feared most, began to flicker. "I'm banned from running it, but the company can still operate. We just need a new managing director, someone young, enthusiastic, someone with ideas." He looked at Rodney. Rodney froze. "No, no way. I know that look. That's the Plonker look." "Rodney," Dell said, his voice dropping into a persuasive purr, "think about it. Legally, there's nothing to stop you taking over. Managing Director Rodney Trotter. It has a ring to it, doesn't it? Like a bell. A very successful bell." "I'd be in charge?" Rodney asked, a dangerous glimmer of ambition showing through his fear. "Sales, purchasing, finance, the lot. You'd be the boss. Rotters, I'd just be a consultant, an advisor, a significant other to the business." Chapter 5. The Managing Director's New Clothes. Within a week, the Peckham Echo carried a small, somewhat desperate advertisement, Trotter's Independent Traders. Under new management, Managing Director Rodney Trotter, Consultancy and Party Planning. Marlene and Boyke, the Trotters' longtime rivals, read the ad in the Nag's Head. "Rodney Trotter is a managing director," Boyke chuckled, his laugh sounding like a cold engine failing to start, and Cliff Richards on 40 silk cut a day. But for Rodney, the title was a weight he intended to carry with pride. He began wearing a suit, a slightly ill-fitting one from a liquidation sale, and carrying a briefcase that contained nothing but a ham sandwich and a map of South London. He even started listening to Mozart's Symphony No. 38 to ease his executive stress. "It helps me unwind," Trig, Rodney told Trigger, the local road sweeper who was as reliable as he was dim. "Are there no words to it, Dave?" Trigger asked, staring at the CD player. "No, Trigger, it's instrumental." While Rodney played at being a mogul, Del was busy in the background, plotting their grand return. He was waiting for the big one, the opportunity that would wipe out the tax debt and put them back in the yellow Capri. The opportunity arrived in the form of a television screen. Welcome to the game show that everyone is talking about. The television blared. This is live. This is Jonathan Ross. And this is Gold Rush. Del watched the screen, his eyes widening. 100,000 pounds. The gold at the end of the rainbow. I'm going on it, Del announced. I've worked it all out. I'm a natural for telly. I've got the charisma, the wit, and I know my history. Del, Cassandra said, looking up from her book. Last night, the question was who introduced the potato to England, and you said King Edward. I didn't hear the question properly. Del protested. I thought he said, who is the king of potatoes? It was a trick question. Chapter 6, The Studio Lights. The night of the recording, the atmosphere in Nelson Mandela House was electric. Del had spent hours preparing, which mostly involved trying to squeeze into a suit that made him look like a very expensive sausage. You look brave, Raquel told him, adjusting his tie. Rodney and Cassandra stayed behind to mind the business, which really meant waiting by the phone in case a legitimate customer accidentally called. The studio was a blur of neon lights and cheering crowds. Jonathan Ross, flamboyant and quick-witted, moved through the contestants like a shark through a school of tuna. And finally, Ross announced, we have Derek Trotter from Peckham, a businessman who enjoys fine wines, the theater, and 16th century Italian Renaissance art. Lovely jubbly, Del whispered to himself, flashing a thumb at the camera. The game was a roller coaster. Del navigated the early rounds with a mix of luck and sheer bravado. He correctly identified Kilimanjaro as the highest mountain in Africa. Any idiot knows Fuji makes cameras, he boasted. He survived a challenge from a financial advisor named Mike. Then came the green question, 25,000 pounds. In which state was President Kennedy born? Ross asked. Del paused. He thought of the assassination. He thought of the motorcade. Well, Del said, trying to be clever, when he was assassinated in 1963, he was in a terrible state. He died. The audience groaned. Ross shook his head. I need one of the three options, Derek, Texas, Florida, or California. Del panicked. He used his shot in the dark. Florida, he guessed. The buzzer sounded like a death knell. No, Derek, it was Texas. You're frozen out. But there was a lifeline. A penalty question worth 50,000 pounds. If he got it right, he went to the gold question. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and the Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Del's mind went blank. He looked at the camera, his eyes pleading. I'm going to have to use my SOS, Jonathan. And who is your savior tonight? Derek. My brother, Rodney. He's at home, taking care of business. He's got to GCEs. You know, he's the brains. Chapter 7, The Ravel Disaster. Back in the flat, the phone rang. Rodney snatched it up. Hello, is that Rodney? Piss off, Mickey, Rodney shouted. You're getting on my tits now with the impressions. Rodney, it's Jonathan Ross. We're live on air. Your brother needs your help for 50,000 pounds. Rodney froze, his heart hammered against his ribs. Oh, my God. Hi, Jonathan. How are you? We don't have time for pleasantries, Rodney. Here's the question. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and the Enchantment? Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Rodney didn't hesitate. He had studied art. He had executive stress music. It's Ravel, Dell, 100%. I'm certain. You heard him. Dell shouted in the studio. I'll go with Ravel. There was a pause, a long, agonizing silence that seemed to stretch across the whole of London. Derek, Jonathan Ross said, his voice filled with genuine regret. That was the wrong answer. It was Segovia. Ravel was a composer, but he wasn't a classical guitarist in that context. You've lost everything. You're frozen out. The world collapsed. Dell kicked the podium. The audience gasped. In Peckham. Rodney dropped the phone. The dial tone sounding like the final notes of a funeral march. Chapter 8, The Aftermath. Dell returned to the flat hours later. He looked like a man who had been through a car wash without the car. I was certain, Rodney moaned, slumped on the sofa. I could have sworn it was Ravel. Even Cassandra thought it was Ravel. Well, you're both a pair of dipsticks, aren't you? Dell snapped, though the fire had gone out of him. Everyone knows Ravel makes shoes. It was a trick question. They sat in silence, the weight of the 40-9-1,000 debt pressing down on them. The dream of the gold was gone. They were back where they started, bankrupt, tired, and stuck in a flat with a ghost of an uncle and a child who thought he was a gangster. Then the phone rang again. Dell picked it up. What? No. His face changed. A look of pure, unadulterated shock crossed his features. He says there's been a mistake. It was Ravel. The researchers got it wrong. He says I can take the 50,000 and go back on the show. Rodney leaped up. Yes, I knew it. I'm a genius. But Dendel's expression shifted. He heard something in the background, the faint, unmistakable sound of a jukebox playing Hooky Street in the Nag's Head. Wait a minute, Dell growled. Nicky Pierce, you little rat, I'll kick your arse into shredded duck. He slammed the phone down. Was it him? Rodney asked, his hopes crumbling. It was Mickey, Dell's side, the ultimate wind-up. He looked at his family, his brother, his wife, his son. They were all there. They were broke, they were bankrupt, and they were the laughing stock of the borough. But as Dell looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Peckham, he felt a familiar warmth in his chest. "Don't worry," he said, putting an arm around Rodney. "This time next year, we'll be millionaires." "We were millionaires last week," Rodney cried. "Details, Rodney," Dell said, a grin finally breaking through. "Just details. Now, get your suit on. We've got a suitcase to fetch from the van. I've heard a rumor about a consignment of digital organizers. They're vibrant, Rodney, pure raison d'etre." As the credits rolled in his mind, Derek Trotter knew one thing for certain. As long as there was a deal to be made and a brother to wind up, the Peckham Phoenix would always find a way to fly. Epilogue: the trading continues. The yellow Capri gear roared well, sputtered to life the following morning. The new management sign was slightly crooked, but it was there. They hadn't won the gold, but they still had the lead. And in the world of the Trotters, lead could always be sold as silver if you found the right buyer. "Cushty," Dell whispered, shifting into gear. "Absolutely cushty. The Trotter Legacy. Book 1, The Midas Touch in Reverse. Chapter 1, The Man in the High Office." The leather in Justin's office didn't just smell of money, it smelled of the kind of ancient, inherited wealth that made Del Boy's designer suits feel like they were still on the rack at Romford Market. Derek Del Boy Trotter sat in the plush armchair, his fingers twitching toward a cigar he knew he shouldn't light. Beside him, Rodney the younger, lankier, and perpetually more anxious brother looked as though he were awaiting a terminal diagnosis rather than a business interview. "I'll fetch the suitcase from the van," Dell had joked earlier, a reflex from the days when the suitcase was their entire world. But now, the suitcase was a relic of a past life. They were men of substance now, or, at least, they were supposed to be. Justin, a man whose skin looked like it had been buffed by professional grade of silk, leaned forward. His eyes were sharp, scanning the two brothers from Peckham like a scientist examining a strange new species of beetle. "I've got the basic details," Justin began, his voice a smooth baritone that echoed off the mahogany walls. "Your business career, the various enterprises. But I want to get an insight into the real you. How you started, how you became so successful, your raison d'etre." Rodney winced at the French. He glanced at Dell. "Oh, no," Dell whispered, leaning toward Rodney. "Laboratory Garney." "It's raison d'etre, Dell," Rodney hissed back. "It means reason for being." "I know what it means, Rodney. I'm just being cosmopolitan," Dell snapped, before turning back to Justin with a smile that could sell ice to a penguin and then charge extra for the stick. "Well, Justin, where shall I start? A few years ago, we were just ordinary blokes, working class heroes, if you will, living the dream in a high-rise in Peckham. Dell's mind drifted back. He remembered the smell of the market, the roar of the three-wheeled van, and the constant, nagging feeling that this time next year was a destination that kept moving further away. Then came the watch, the Harrison Lesser watch, a small piece of ticking history that had turned to market traders into multimillionaires overnight. We discovered an artifact, Dell said, his voice dropping into a reverie, an almost priceless piece of British horology. At first, Rodney here being the philanthropist he is, wanted to give it to the British Museum. A gift to the nation, he said. Rodney looked at the ceiling. I never said that. Dell. You did, Rodney. In your heart, you did. But eventually, we decided to flog it. 6.5 million pounds. It was a number that still made Dell's head spin. They had divvied it up. In short, Uncle Albert had a nice little drink to see him through his twilight years, and then they had looked to the future. We sought professional advice. Dell continued, his chest swelling. A city stockbroker, he pointed us toward a vibrant venture, the Central American market. Rodney let out a long, slow breath. The Central American market. It had sounded so exotic. It had felt like the ultimate nice little earner. But the tides of the sea, as Dell often mused, were as unpredictable as a Peckham election. Chapter 2. The Gilded Fall. The transition from the penthouses of London to the sun-drenched shores of Barbados had been seamless. For a while, the Trotters lived like royalty. There was Raquel, Dell's significant other, the woman who had stood by him when he was selling hooky watches and now wore diamonds that could blind a pilot. There was Cassandra, Rodney's wife, whose patience was perhaps the only thing more substantial than their bank balance. And there was Damien, the son Dell worshipped, the boy who would never have to know the weight of a suitcase. But even in paradise, the ghosts of Peckham lingered. We took the family everywhere, Dell told Justin, his eyes shining with a mix of pride and a lingering grief he couldn't quite name. Business trips to the Caribbean, luxury hotels. We were making more money than the Royal Mint. But we weren't. We weren't just about the cash. We were about the style. He remembered the swimming pools, the champagne, the sense that they were finally, truly untouchable. And then the news hit. It was like the changing of the seasons. One day it was summer, and the next, the world was frozen. The negotiations in Central America had collapsed. The vibrant venture turned out to be a house of cards built on shifting sands. The internet, that invisible web Dell only half understood, had carried the news of their ruin faster than a speeding bullet. Suddenly, Rodney interjected, his voice flat. The calls stopped coming. Our business associates became ghosts. We were in a financial wilderness. They had paid for their last luxury hotel on a credit card that was withdrawn before the ink on the receipt was dry. They had returned to London not in a private jet, but in a scramble of desperation. But we had friends, Dell said, his voice regaining some of its gravelly strength. Good people.